This happens all the time. I'm sitting down with a freshman and their parents, and they say, hey, I want to be a high school history teacher. So I say, great, you can expect to start out earning anywhere between $54,000 and $115,000, depending on if you go to grad school and if you're willing to teach AP. And you see the parents' mouths just drop to the floor because parents don't understand today's job market. It's summertime, which means I've been talking at a lot of orientations lately. For those who are new, I've been researching and teaching about the job market since 2017 at R1 universities. And that means I talk to a lot of parents who are sending their kids off to college for the first time. And something that I'm finding is that parents really don't understand the early career market that they are sending their kids into, which makes sense but can cause a few issues, especially when it comes to parents pressuring young adults to pursue or not pursue a certain career when they themselves are misinformed about how that industry actually works. And so today, I want to dispel some myths. First, by talking about the surprising realities of today's job market, followed by what the research says about how to choose a major or a career, and then finally with some surefire ways to land a well-paying job in any career that actually works in today's market. It's a lot to go over, so please be sure to like this video and subscribe if you are new, and let's just get right into it. So the chart you saw earlier is true. There are high school teachers starting out between 50 and 100K in many American markets now, especially for those who go on to earn master's degrees or above, and who take on additional roles like advising clubs, leadership, or teaching AP. And it's not just secondary ed that's seen big bumps to their salaries in the past few years. Field jobs like park rangers and archaeologists are now starting out between 60 and 70K. And even writers are starting out at insane salaries if they go into technical, grant, or social media writing. And in a country where the average salary across the board is 40 to 60K, depending on which source you decide to trust, that is an amazing starting salary for most people launching right out of school. But if you go up to almost any parent and you're like, hey mom and dad, I want to be a teacher or an archaeologist or a writer, you're probably going to be met with that condescending, like, good luck making any money doing that. And that's because they're thinking about a job market that's 20, 30, maybe 40 plus years old. And for them, that was true. High school teachers up until very recently made poverty wages. Now, admittedly, elementary teachers and support staff still do, but the mass exodus from the field and politicians trying to combat rampant inflation has created new financial incentives for people to go into fields that were historically undervalued but necessary for society to function. And so what we're seeing are pay increases happening very specifically in both government jobs and in jobs at very wealthy companies. Wealthy companies just because they have the power to pay people more when they make more money, and so they can use financial incentive structures to recruit and retain talent. And then at government jobs because all it takes is a single law being passed for high school teachers, archaeologists, and anyone else to see a dramatic increase in their starting pay. Where you're seeing wages stagnate are in jobs that are becoming oversaturated or in jobs at smaller private companies that have too much bureaucratic red tape in the way of them paying workers more. Data science is probably the best example of a field that's become very oversaturated over the past decade and is now paying people less money than it used to in the past. So our good friends over at Fortune magazine have labeled data science as the third fastest growing job in America, and there are Bureau of Labor stats to back that up. But just because something is rapidly growing does not mean that it is paying people more. Taxi drivers, solar installers, and vet technicians are also amongst some of the fastest growing jobs in America, but these are all careers with median salaries under $50,000. And while over half of data scientists who are currently established in the field are making six figures, there have been increasing reports of of recent graduates in data science not being able to find a job or not being able to find a job that pays very well. Many of whom have had to take on additional skills or degrees in software engineering just to have the baseline skill set that companies are looking for with their entry-level data employees. And I think that's something that both parents and young adults alike really take for granted, is that it can take a long time to earn six figures in STEM. And I know this very well as somebody who works primarily with engineering majors at university. Entry-level STEM jobs are usually a place for young adults to prove themselves before they go on and work at a different job that's going to pay them more. And more often than not, you're going to graduate from a STEM field making just as much money as your teacher friends and your friends in marketing are as well. And that can be pretty frustrating, especially for somebody who became an engineer because they thought that was the way to make a lot of money. But earning six figures as an engineer often requires multiple years, changing jobs and companies, and more often than not, moving cities or even going back to college in order to qualify for those higher level six-figure roles. And so it can be a pretty unstable first decade that you're working in that career. Whereas your friend teaching history at your old high school can stay at that exact same school for 10 years and find themselves making six figures at the exact same time you are, as so long as they go back and earn a master's degree. But the ultimate truth is that earning potential or starting salaries aren't really the best metrics to look at when deciding what career is best for you. Starting salaries have a ridiculous amount of variability across the job market, and earning potential has way more to do with somebody's personality than it necessarily does with what they specifically decide to go into. I'm sure you've seen those articles about how humanities graduates earn more than most other majors mid-career. If you haven't, I made a video about this, but the gist is that it's not that companies are looking for anthropology or history graduates when deciding to hire upper level leadership. It's because the types of people who major in something like anthropology or history tend to be the types of people who are passionate about what they're doing, and also the types of people who have enough of an independent, free-thinking personality to go to college for something despite the fact that they get pushback from their parents and from society. And so once those people actually get their foot in the door of a career, they start getting rapidly promoted and then eventually out-earn almost everyone else in the job market. But again, it's because of their personality, not necessarily what they studied. On the flip side of that, oversaturation can actually cause careers to start paying people less money because of the types of people who go into fad careers. Whenever a career starts to get popular because of its earning potential, you start to get a lot of people with warped motivations or a lack of ambition filing into that career because they think of it as a get-rich-quick scheme, even though they don't necessarily want to be there. And companies start to realize that they have an abundance of new graduates with a very specific skill set who are just kind of complacent people and can therefore be lowballed in terms of how much money they're being paid. Like, I can't even begin to tell you how many of my students don't actually want to be software engineers, but they were good at math in high school and they had no ambitions in life, and so their parents are like, hey, you should become an engineer so that you can make a bunch of money. And so usually it's those people who make up the entire third of engineering graduates who are never able to actually land a job in the industry after they graduate college. But putting that cynicism aside, let's back up and talk about what actually does work for choosing a major or a career. So in the world of business, there's something called a Pew analysis. Bear with me for a second, this is a little technical, but I promise I'll simplify it. A Pew analysis takes qualitative data, which means something that you can't necessarily measure, like happiness or beauty, and gives a number to it intentionally to turn it into quantitative data. And we do that so that we can objectively measure more superficial or emotional considerations against each other to make the most optimized decision for ourselves in our lives. Like, you might be able to make a ton of money working on an oil rig, but that's Scary and dangerous. You might also make a lot of money working for Berkshire Hathaway in Omaha, but you might get super depressed after having to move to Nebraska. And so these so-called superficial reasons actually matter a lot more than people give them credit for. Can you emotionally handle doing a job that goes against certain values? Can you emotionally handle living in a place that is not beautiful? Can you handle being away from your family? Like, these are things that you really need to think about when choosing a career. And I'll be honest with you here for a minute. I am making a lot less money than I could be if I was some economic analyst for some big company in a big city. I teach career education in a college town because I value leading a simpler life, because I value being around friends and family, and because I value being in a pretty and enjoyable community. I was incredibly stressed and depressed back in grad school when I was living in a big city, and I don't think I could ever go back to that lifestyle. On the flip side, a lot of people could never live the way that I do because they value the energy and the resources of big cities, and they value making a certain dollar amount, whereas I just don't. And so self-awareness is incredibly important when you are deciding what you want to do with the rest of your life. And so once you start figuring out what that is, it's also important that you start taking effective next steps towards that goal. There are really 3 necessary steps for landing any dream career. And the first is to reverse engineer that goal. So let's say that you're 18 years old and you want to be a park ranger at some national park. What you want to do is figure out how people today actually become park rangers, and then work backwards to where you are right now. So the first thing you'll probably figure out is that park rangers are hired exclusively through usajobs.gov. And when you go on to USA Jobs, you'll find that listings for park rangers require that they either have a 4-year degree in criminal justice or natural resources, or that they are a veteran of the military. And so right off the bat, you've got some options. You also notice that they look for people who have done seasonal work before in things like the Peace Corps or conservation. And you notice that you're required to submit a federal resume for these positions, which is very different than a normal resume in the broader job market. So once you start getting some requirements in front of you, you then backtrack what you need to do to where you are right now. Also, bonus tip, if you're having a hard time getting this information from job descriptions, you can also go onto the LinkedIn pages of people who are working your dream job right now and basically reverse engineer their career back to when they were in your position today. But regardless of the amount of next steps in front of you, it's important that you start where you are. Okay, so you're 18. Your next step is not become park ranger. No, your next step is either to enlist in the military or to go to college for natural resources or criminal justice. Let's say you decide to take the natural resources route. Well, you're gonna need to do seasonal works in the parks, so you should probably go to a college that's near national parks. So you decide that you're going to go to a university in the Western US. From there, you start doing that seasonal work over the summer so that you can slowly but surely develop a long-form federal resume that highlights all of your academic experiences and your experiences doing seasonal work under the federal infrastructure of the National Park Service. This is what I call the career snowball. You can't just apply to something out of nowhere and expect to get it. Like, you would be amazed at how many of my students have never had a job before, and then they are legitimately confused when they apply to work at NASA and can't land an interview. But I'm so passionate and I love space so much. Cool. You're also being hired to do a job. And so you need a mountain of evidence behind you that proves that you have the foundational academics, skills, and experiences necessary in order to get started doing that job. And that often means taking on experiences that aren't directly related to what you're trying to do, but that can tangentially support you on your career journey. An example of this would be working as an EMT before you become a doctor, or working as a drone technician before you apply to work on NASA's satellites, or maybe taking on an undergraduate research project before you apply to grad school. That way you can present at a conference and be prepared to go into an experience where publishing research research is a requirement for funding. You start small, and then you progressively take on bigger and more impressive opportunities until that snowballs into you being a superstar when you apply to your first big boy job. And that also means leveraging your resources. You would be amazed at how many college students don't go to career fairs. At least at my school, 85% of students who graduate with a full-time job offer in hand got that job offer from some type of career fair. And that's because if a company is looking to hire college students, they're not just gonna apply on LinkedIn and Indeed and hope that some college senior applies. No, they're gonna take a couple $100 in a few afternoons, and they are going to go to university career fairs where the school will literally spoon feed them qualified and eager talent. And so when people talk about networking to access the hidden job market, this is what they are talking about. These resources exist for you to take advantage of. And sometimes they are the only resource for landing jobs in certain entry-level fields. Engineering is a really good example of that. And so for 99% of you, you need to stop listening to what your parents have to say about your career goals because they probably don't understand how today's job market works. What works is reverse engineering your goal, starting your career snowball, and then figuring out how to use the resources available to you to your own advantage. Once you do that, you will start on the road to success in whatever career that you choose, and in whatever ways that you choose to define success. I will see you in the next video.